So on Andy's inspiration, I decided to download the local version of Google Earth, and it's much better actually. So
that's really good resolution.
Yeah, it's nice, isn't it? Yeah, and I did the elevation enhancement thing.
Okay, I'm missing information here. Enlighten me.
Yeah, what is a local version of Google Earth?
Oh, yeah, and if it's better, then I want it.
It's the one you download, and it's resident on your PC versus the one there's a web version, and then there's the.
Oh, yeah.
So we were using the web version, and they're pretty different.
Welcome to the September 11th edition of the Electric View. I'm Neil Thompson. Today we have Heather, Dave, Jim, Robert, Richard, Edwin, Buddy, and Andy. We are discussing the dating mechanisms we have for the Earth, some ideas in the electric archaeology realm, and end up doing some planning for our Geology Tour for 2019. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Yeah, I have Google Earth downloaded with updates occasionally with new maps and so forth, although I hardly use it. But speaking of oddities, do you like how that bottom part of Africa looked like it was just sort of sheared off a little bit? It kind of looks like, a torrent went through there and sort of rounded that whole tip off, or leveled it out.
Right there.
Yeah, just the lines going across the bottom of it.
Uh-huh.
Are those cliff faces? I don't even know.
Yeah, there are cliff faces on the south. It's the South Cape. It's a cape. It's a beautiful cape with Table Mountain, so flat top Table Mountain.
It's amazing.
Is that the Brandenburg Mountains down there?
Type in Tafelberg. Thfel Berg. F-E-L.
B-E-R-G.
Yeah. It should be okay,
cool.
Just zoom in there and
it's doing it by itself.
There we go.
All right.
Thanks, Johnny.
All right. We can go to the Tafelberg Furnishers if you want.
That'd be great.
So Table Mountain, that's a nice mountain to look at.
Okay.
Should be.
Wow. See how enhanced we got it?
Jeez.
Man, look out.
That's some enhancement, yeah.
That's just a little bit, maybe too much, huh? It's interesting.
Wow.
It looks animated, but there you go.
Yeah. You want me to pull it back down? I think I know how. So.
Have you guys ever looked up Google Earth Easter eggs? There's all sorts of cool things that you can look up, and it takes you to.
They're pretty big, actually. I'll go to the red. It's a normal here.
You were saying there, buddy?
That's one.
Easter eggs?
Yeah, just Easter eggs in Google Earth. If you look it up, there's all sorts of really cool things that it takes you to.
Yeah, that's one. So that should be fairly close to scale. So, Ito, you were saying these are. Have you visited here before?
No, I wish I could. Yeah, definitely. I hope to go there one day. But I know many people that did go there, and they're all swearing to me that it's a very beautiful country, but also very dangerous.
Uh-huh.
Lots of places that are pretty much no-go places. And you don't even go without guards that are armed at nighttime in certain places in Johannesburg, for example.
Uh-huh.
At least what I've been told.
Oh, I've seen some of those videos from South Africa, the music videos even. They are crazy. Just looking at them, I'm like some parts you're like, oh, that just looks, like America or wherever. And then other parts I'm like, that guy's sitting there with a friggin' lion, and 2 AKs. And he's like, yeah, just casually walking down the road with my lion and 2 AKs.
It's a bit different,
Because this is his personal protection. Apparently they have this thing to prevent carjackers that was invented down there, which was flamethrowers that shoot at the side of the car. So you just push a button and it will burn the person beside the car alive.
Nice.
It's like
Mad Max.
How do you prevent carjacking? That's how they suggested it. I was like, wow.
I was thinking, make the car slightly electric, give them a shot. No, they're like, no, we're going full out here, okay? We're going to chop them off at the knees, flamethrower or something, and you're like, wow, like what situation must there be for that to be an answer, as opposed to, how about just move? That but of course, because if you have the money to buy that,
Well, that's the sad part I was alluding to. With the farmers, Neil, 50 years ago, they did move, and in the inlands where nobody was living, they made their state for 50 years, and then it was conquered by the Brits, So they did move, actually, a couple of times.
Oh, well, that's,
First from Europe to escape that crap, and then from the British at the Cape, and then the British came in again, and they could no longer flee, and they fought.
Well, if we get more farmland up here because of global warming, we'll just come on over. That's what Russia's doing. Come on over.
Yeah, I don't fear that climate warming thing very much.
Yeah.
No, it's an ice age that's coming.
If I was a betting man, I'd probably be in that boat, yeah.
I think we have a plasma age coming.
I don't even fear that ice age. Even if a real ice age were coming, there would be huge swaths of land coming free. Now, me being Dutch, we go like, hey, new land, let's build a dike. We'll have a nice city over there. I mean, that's not a problem. That's quite good. I'll sign up for it. We can increase the Netherlands again. We're a tiny country.
Yeah, I think the Netherlands are what? That's about the same size as my province or something.
Oh, a land size without a water is like 35,000 kilometers square, something like that. It's not much. So we could use some land.
Just looking at the stuff with a little bit more enhancement, just to see what it looks like.
So it'll be people from the northern hemisphere, from the people, like the northern hemisphere will be going down toward the equator to escape the glaciers.
Well, I don't think that's going to happen either. So, I mean, what I meant was is that the idea of what an ice age is, and I mean, just now I'm realizing how much I don't know, because we were talking about this the other day where you were with pole moving. Edwin knows what we're talking about there, and the idea that it was over a certain area, and that's why Greenland, and that's why this happened, and that's why they came from here. But just because it gets cold, I mean, what really matters is, do you have a cold enough summer that the ice does not melt? That's the key, and that's
if you believe the ice core record, then we're most of the time we're in an ice age, and it's only once every 100,000 years that we have an interglacial period like we have right now. And so, and the geological records show there's been multiple ice ages.
How far back does the ice record go? Do you know offhand, how many hundreds of thousands or?
Yeah, well,
we have a unbroken Greenland core or something that they can count all those layers?
Well, I looked up ice core records once in Google and got directed to NOAA website, and they had a couple files there which I downloaded. One for Vostok and one for Greenland, and the Vostok one goes back 700,000 years.
700,000 years,
right? And the Greenland one only goes back 50,000 years, which
but
I'm not sure what the meaning of that is.
So
well, that means that the pole is moving quite rapidly over Greenland in my book.
Well, no, I mean, it's not that the pole moves, it's that there's much more extensive ice coverage.
Were you there with us, Richard, when we were talking about the moving of the pole by Mario BuildReps?
Yeah, that was interesting.
I don't know if it's true. This is why we were having...
I don't either.
I don't... Well, that's what I mean. I really have to take into account that I don't know as much as I think I know. And going with this whole
well, it's always been this way and shall always be type of attitude in the conventional sense. Just going with conventional geology, conventional. I'm no longer remotely certain on any of this. So, and the cause of some of this. So, is there a stellar component? Is there a pole moving component? Is there a planetary realignment component? Type of thing. So.
My thesis is that it's fluctuations in the current coming into the solar system.
And that might be a thing, yeah.
And I think both are happening, actually.
But the thing is, I mean, where the pole happens to be is one issue, but the amount of ice coverage is another issue. Whether or not the pole moved, if you've got glaciers covering.
That is a very good point there, Richard. And if you would allow me to interject something there about ice coverage, from the top of my mind, the south part of Greenland has pretty thick ice coverage, which is basically anomalous because it's pretty much south. And if you look at the Antarctic, what would it be, the western part, the part that's underneath America, if you will, that has very relatively thin ice coverage. And so there are quite a few anomalies, and places that are far higher up the Arctic, for example, have thick ice coverage. And the places with thick ice coverage in the Antarctic are basically a desert in snowfall. So there are many anomalies here. But if you plug in a moving pole, suddenly starts to make sense, especially in the path of the pole that's suggested at the Mario BuildReps site. Greenland and Antarctic make a lot of sense then in ice coverage, actually.
Andy actually wanted to talk about this. You were mentioning, and we were talking when I was at your house there about how archaeology, electric archaeology and so forth, and obviously we were talking with Chris Dunn on this very similar subject. But in this particular case, Mario BuildReps was using the alignments of archaeological sites. I'm just telling this to Andy so he knows. But he was showing that if we aligned everything to true north, the way that we do now, then it shows that at certain times these buildings were aligned to different north poles. And that's very interesting. And it also implies the age of some of these structures can be dated that way and puts them in a different archaeological context. In addition, because we can compare some of this with ice cores, it could be that these structures are way friggin' older than we think they are.
Well, if you allow me another interjection there, Neil, the first thing we could do with not so much the dating on itself, which is disputable, as everybody here knows, I think.
Yeah.
Because of many problems, but let's put that aside just for a moment. Because of this alignment, you can see that, and this is for Andy too, the megalithic sites in the American continent, so west of the Atlantic, they always point to the right, if you will, the older they get. Never towards the east. So, never towards the west, always towards the east. And in the right side of the hemisphere, so in Europe and Asia, they always point to the left, always to the west. So they always converge somewhere in between, and they always converge at certain spots. Now, what we can do in the dating very easily, which we can do right now, is take those alignments, meaning that archaeological site at Pumapunku, whatever, right, coincides with the line of a particular temple in Egypt with that alignment. So we can coincide now certain eras or certain peoples or certain archaeological sites in the same time frame, at least. We can equate them now.
Is the data available to do that? To build a database of these alignments and
it's been done. It's there.
It's already. I mean, is the triangulation done? That's what I'm saying.
Yes. Can you bring up the site of Mario BuildReps? It's called Mario BuildReps, I think. There it is, or at least the tool.
I think that's all we need. Yeah, the video was great too, but this will work.
Just a tiny little bit. Scroll down just a tiny little bit.
Is that not that one?
No, it's
there. You are.
This here?
No,
a little bit
right
up
there.
That one.
Right there.
Yeah, I think you're late. There's a little bit of a delay. So that one.
Right, with the red dots.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
And
Now, is this correlated in any way with time frames or eras or something?
Yes, and that's kind of what we're debating here because
This
it's
blew our
correlated
minds.
to the ice core data. He has a lot of pages, videos, etc. on this website, so I strongly encourage you to take a look at it. I think it's fascinating personally. And it's very strong evidence in my mind. And he did all kinds of statistic calculations. So if you want to dive into that stuff, it's all there, highly correlating. And I think it's mind-boggling. I think this is the opening to really study our history again in a little bit differently here. We can correlate different hemisphere archaeological sites by pointing out that they come at least from the same era, right? Same time frame.
So he was starting to compare that to the ice cores and noticed that at certain periods it moved, and at other periods it didn't appear to be glacial, interglacial periods, and so forth. Now, if that data is correct, it's in the lower right there. You can see on the screen, but I'm sure that you can go and review this later or watch this video and you'll see what we're talking about. But basically, he pushes us back to about 530 million years. Or 1,000? 30,000? 1,000, okay.
Yeah, 500,000, I think. Something like that to that effect, based on the ice core data set, right? So take that into account. Now, the beautiful thing here is that, Andy, now that you're here, and Neil and Andy, if you allow me, and everybody else, what we were talking about is what mechanism is there to cause this shift of the actual moving North Pole, not the magnetic pole, the actual pole. And in my mind, only electric forces in the big scale would be able to do that, right? And that would cause basically a huge catastrophe. And I think, Andy, this is where you should jump in, right?
Yeah, I think it's an electromechanical force that I see evidence in geology that these shifts took place. I can see evidence in geology of where I'm interpreting it anyway, that the Earth gimbaled around and left marks and things scraped. and I also see the geologic evidence of electromechanical forces that, basically tilted the plates, like the Easter Island, what is it called? The Nazca plate there. It's tilted. And that affected those like Pumapunka and Lake Titicaca. And there's all kinds of evidence that there was a huge upheaval there. And I think it was these electromechanical forces that were involved in the process. Now, beyond that and exactly how it works, I think we need to understand more, have a theory better about what's inside the Earth than we have right now to understand how these electromechanical forces would have acted.
Translation, electric telluric currents, if you will, Bruce's work, right?
Yeah, and Bruce's work and some of the things that Paul has said are pretty intriguing, and I think that, I just think that there's a lot of work to be done to understand the interior of the Earth and how the currents flow internally. How those telluric currents, I would say that there is the geomagnetic field to me looks like a plasmoid, and that in this core of the Earth there has to be like a winding of these currents. But around inside the crust, I'm very certain, based on what I see in geology, there's currents flowing there. So it's like there's two primary and secondary currents inside the Earth that we see the result of. That's what I think I would like to understand better, or try to theorize around better to understand how it could create the gimbaling of the Earth, and then how that relates to the geology I'm seeing.
Exactly. That's I think kind of the way where I want to go too. Yeah.
But there's one element I think plays a role here. Again, going to the ice core record, the most dramatic feature of it is the rapidity with which an ice age ends.
Yeah.
And my thesis on that, which, the talk I gave at 2015, is that there's a large incoming current surge. A surge with so much energy in it that it melts the glaciers in a relatively short time, an amazingly short time. So think about what the other consequences of such a electrical energy input would be. So you've got these two currents coming in the north and the south, which exert a torque. And if they are aligning themselves to what the current magnetic structure of the Earth is and the telluric currents, it might be pulling the Earth strongly to rotate in that direction, and that would be something that could cause the shift.
Well,
yes, and that falls in line with an electric catastrophe and a shifting of the Earth, and including the scriptures that talk about the stars that fall or the heavens fell or shifted, whatever that is, right? There's so much that points in something like this, and I think we're onto something here. This Mario BuildReps, I think he did a terrific job there. Very good.
Yeah,
it's very strong.
Another consequence is like between planets. So you've got these huge currents coming into the Earth. You've also got the Earth's tail then extends much further, which is going to affect Mars, affect the next planet. And so you could get into the whole polar alignment, polar configuration thing, Well, so there's a lot that can be explained by a huge surge of incoming energy.
To me, the whole the glaciation, and then the end of the glaciation, like you say, it ends very abruptly. I mean, it seems to me it is. I would agree with you that to me the theory is that there's a thermoelectric effect that's chilling and then not chilling because of surges in current, and it all speaks to this polar alignment and the yo-yoing you would get in the alignment that would surge and then dissipate, the charge, and that all makes total sense to me.
Yeah, a huge impact. That's the catastrophe. That's the polar shift. That's also the cause for a dramatic, quick change, and then a slowly mellowing out, re-establishing equilibrium, if you will, and then until the next event.
And then one thing, when I talked about Ice Age, it's because when you look at the ice core record, what you see are semi-regular spikes, not exactly regular, but semi-regular. So you could talk, there's a lot of randomness in there. But the one thing that's not random is the symmetry of the peaks. In other words, if you have one that goes up really rapidly, it comes down just as rapidly. So once we start down the end of the Ice Age, rapidly, a couple thousand years to get to an Ice Age. I'm not saying next week. But a couple thousand years, that's very rapid change.
And we got to.
So is there a reverse electrical effect? In other words, is the sudden diminution
absolutely
of energy going to be just as dramatic as the sudden influx of energy?
Absolutely. In a thermoelectric effect, that's exactly what would happen. The current dictates the current flow dictates the heat. And so if the current's taken away, you get cold or hot, or vice versa. It depends which way you're looking at the flow and the dielectric effects that are going on. But it would heat and cool very rapidly with the change in the planetary circuit.
All right.
In addition,
so it's like the radiation from the sun gives you a base temperature level, which is, let's say, something like what an ice age is, and then it's electrical energy that gives you the adds on to that.
Yeah, it's not like sunlight is not a factor suddenly, right? It's still important, but the electric component is totally underlighted right now, absolutely ignored, and that's what we're touching upon. I think we're pointing out several mechanisms right now, or several things that are going on, and I believe we need to take, it's not like only this one or only that one, I think several of these things are going on. Electromagnetic heating, cooling, actual polar shifts, combine that with all the potential, the disasters that come from it, like flood waves, etc., acting up fault lines, volcanoes,
I think
submerging.
In any change in the electric field of the solar system that we're orbiting around in is gonna create this effect. So if we were in a polar alignment, I could see how that would correlate with these coming and going of ice ages. But I can also see that, solar flares or maybe, distant supernova are affecting the sun and causing flaring, and those effects would also manifest in the same way. And I think there's correlations with events where there's correlations with supernova around 11.
Especially because of the long-term scale, right? That just the long-term scale points towards a cosmological origin, as you
yeah,
right.
I can only imagine the sun is responding to its environment, and then we respond to our environment. And so if the sun gets amped up by some supernova nearby, then we're going to feel that effect too. And I think, I know Heinrich Svenssmark's done a correlation with supernova and ice ages. So I don't know how well that correlation works, but I know he's been looking at that.
Well, it wouldn't really be how close it is. It's like, is it on our current filament? So like,
take the next lane, please.
Well, I mean, those stars are born along current filaments. We know that. Well, they remain along those same current filaments and are powered by those same current filaments as long as they exist. So, there's a filament basically going from the center of the galaxy to us with a bunch of stars along it. So if one of those stars goes supernova or has any kind of discharge phenomenon, then that gets passed down the filament to us.
It's basically like a Christmas tree lighting system.
That's what they found with the Sirius system. You remember where that fits? That Sirius is like right behind us on the gas cloud that we're strung on. And the Sirius Research Institute noted that Earth's rotation even speeds up and slows down right as that the Sirius pair, Sirius A and Sirius B, as they orbit, when one swings by the other one relative to us, there's actually changes in Earth's rotation that they've matched to that. So that's that's an argument for what Richard's saying, definitely.
That would also make sense why the ancients have been watching at Sirius and they knew so much with the Dogon, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the one thing I considered as a possibility is suppose when this current surge comes down our filament, which is where it comes from,
SI.
What if it was so
SI.
powerful?
Yep.
What if it was so powerful that it went into glow mode? So you'd actually be seeing this glow mode filament going back to Sirius, and that'd be quite an impressive thing to see, and quite a strong reason to give Sirius prominent.
Definitely would be.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure.
Wow. And then when you have a disaster, that's where it came from. From Sirius.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one thing, I don't want to go back. The whole supernova thing to me is really fascinating, and I think there's correlations that in like around 1100 BC or AD rather, and I think at some other periods of time. But the thing about the polar alignment we were talking about before, I want to go back to for just a second, because all these ancient monuments seem to be the ancients seem to be obsessed with precession, and I'm just wondering if the planet, our precession is every time we're in this situation and things get amped up, like in a polar alignment, if that would create the electromagnetic force that would gimbal the Earth every time, and then it would return back to its original precession afterwards. And I wonder if that's what the ancients were smiling, where they were so obsessed with that, with their monuments in identifying, the precession record.
Well, the precession belongs to the current ages, if you will, and we went through certain houses already, right? And we're about to go into Aquarius, I believe.
Yeah.
So that's after the last big pole shift, if you will, right? But we do know, and I kind of distinctly in the past going there or stumbling upon it, that there are different older zodiacal systems, right? There are many more zodiac systems out there that we don't give any credence to right now. And they are much, much older, much more antique. So again, that would correlate with a different pole position, a different zodiacal system. Right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I would argue that the current cycle is still all after the last real big disaster, if you will. There might have been smaller ones, I don't know. But seems to be
well, if it was a recurring event and the ancients were building their monuments, this is what they would be looking for. I mean, it seems to me it's like, okay, they would be totally obsessed with precession and our position relative to the stars around us in the solar system. And it just seems to be that the monuments have these orientations, and where north is one factor, but how they were tracking precession and these other orbital mechanics. I think we're just scratching the surface of what they.
I totally agree. But the first thing you need to do after you have had a disaster is build a new monument with all the stuff that you need to observe, etc. That's aligned to north again. Otherwise, you're not doing much measurement, right? So you have to reestablish your base, if you will, and therefore you need a monument aligning to the true north. So that would have been your first priority again, I would argue, every time. And that's why I built a monument myself.
There was that, in Mario BuildReps' video, there was a particular monument he was showing that they started to build a monument of a certain type. They built a platform of it. And then in the middle of that platform, there's an off-center platform. Like the platform is angled at a different angle. Now, they noted that if you were standing at a certain point, right at the stairs, over each of the other things, if you calculated where the sun would rise and sun would set at a particular time, with this new orbit, with a new pole, it would be exactly over each of those areas. And we noticed the same thing with Pumapunku, that you can stand at a certain point and see, okay, over that corner is this, and over that corner is that. Now, the lowest point and the highest point, the solstices. Anyway, the building was off kilter on top of it, though, because, according to his theory, if you stand now at a particular point, you will see the new poles. So, the new solstices. This means that this was built during a shift, and I think that rate alone is wonderful, because it shows that these people recognize, they weren't doing it for beauty, they weren't doing it for ritual, they were doing it for a friggin' reason, and I find that to be important in backing up your claim.
Yeah, they did it for a reason. And in many monuments, we see an older base with a different alignment. In fact, certain temples in Egypt, they have that human shape, that standing human shape there, with many different alignments.
Yeah.
But
So what's the oldest? How far back do these temples go?
Well, if you take this Mario BuildReps systems into account and you base it on the ice core data that we currently accept, so then you go back like a couple of 100,000 years, that means humans have been building those temples a few 100,000 years ago.
Yeah, well, okay, but does that 200,000, does that same date correspond to whatever evidence they have for the date of the monument?
Oh, God, no. No.
Well, certain temples are dated now back maybe 3,000 years instead of 30.
They have dated everything based on the top layer of construction, if you will, and almost every site has been built upon, over the centuries on top of the older stuff. And I don't know of any very good evaluations where they go down to the foundation rocks and figure out how old they are compared to the newer rocks.
And you would never know with carbon dating, because carbon dating at the most, I believe you go back about 100,000 years, something to that effect, at the most, right? But if this stuff actually goes back 200,000 years, you would already see nothing no more. And you remember, there's a lot of bias in this world, right? But I would argue this system that Mario BuildReps presents here would give us a tool at least to try to come up with a different dating system and different correlations there.
Yeah, I don't really trust anything beyond about 12,000 years ago, dating wise, because they have like tree ring correlations back that far. But who knows how long a year was before that? I don't know.
Well, I would question though the dating of where the pole was based on ice core records. I mean, how do they? There must be some model they have in their mind that would relate the ice core records to where the poles happen to be. I don't see any relationship myself.
In Mario, in Mario's work, there's he was referring to periods of glaciation and inglaciation. He marked that down across his pole moving.
So he wants to say that the poles moved like 100,000 years apart. Well, that's a theory.
Something like that, yeah.
That's a theory, but it's just an assumption. Like, okay, why would the pole move? Well, it's probably because there was an ice age. Okay, well, let's say that's true.
Well, he points out the correlations. I don't think he is aware of the EU agenda. At least I'm not seeing it in his work that I noticed.
There's also but there is a point to this whole electricity causing mechanical torque. We saw the same thing with, and I think I pointed this out before, Comet West. I think it was Comet Tempel 1, actually. We sent a copper projectile to it, and you could see at the last few seconds as it gets hit with the bolt of electricity coming off the comet that the whole thing just suddenly torques and flies it twists because of that, the right-hand rule, basically. And it's just amazing that this type of force was, caught on camera for only 3 or 4 frames.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw the spark, the discharge, and Wall talked about that as being proof of the different charge level. But I didn't ever see the torque part. That's interesting. You
get to see one from the outside where they're filming the impact from the, I guess we'll call it the orbiter, but the projectile itself had a camera on it. And if you watch that video as it goes in and in as it's zooming. Basically, it's not zooming in; it's actually going into this thing. Right. But just in the last few frames before she exploded, you could see that the whole thing just torques and like off to the right or something. The
projectile torques.
The camera is looking in a different direction. The last few frames, it basically got. It went off axis. It was looking straight where it was going to hit, and then it got hit with the bolt of lightning, so to speak, and then went whoa and started looking to the right, and it started. You could see the force acted on it,
right,
and that's just not talked about, but you can see it with your own eyes. So don't know what to say there, but what it was in space. What other force acted on it?
Hang on just a second.
I'll hang. Now I wonder if he's talking to us.
So, has Barry of BuildReps, has he spoken? Does he follow like a conference circuit at all, or is he kind of
no clue.
Independent?
I have no clue. I think he's independent, but who knows what he does nowadays?
He's obviously into it, and it'd be good to give him some attention, I'm sure.
Right.
I think it's fabulous work. He pretty much sold me on this topic. I was already, truth be told, I already was of the opinion that something like this was happening along that line for many other reasons. And then I stumbled on his work, and I saw the correlations he made with the statistics there, with the alignments there. I did some checking as far as I could on my own, just a few picks there. I can find no mistakes really. Several things, there are still questions there, but I think there are new questions. And I think this should be taken seriously. And for me, the whole story of our history and geological and archaeological data, I think for me it starts to make a lot more sense. So,
you mean with the onset of of electrical thinking? Is that, I forgot the first part
Well,
of your sentence.
as an electrical force hitting the Earth, as we just speculate about, from supernovas to whatever, right?
Right.
Causing the Earth to have that torque momentum that Neil was alluding to, causing a huge catastrophe on the Earth with all the geology stuff that we see, and from mountains
Right.
to ocean sinkings to ocean varying, ice ages, etc. I think everything fits in quite nicely.
Yeah.
Personally.
Now, one thing that that bothered me about the ice core records is that all the peaks are cyclical. You don't have one-off things going on, which would say that supernova are cyclical. And that actually makes sense because the standard model says a supernova is a star exploding. But what it actually is double layers collapsing.
Right.
So because of the double layer collapse, you do have a mass explosion. But the gravitational and electrical fields go so far out that they do not escape. They don't have any kind of escape velocity from the magnetic field. And so they get pulled back in and reform the star.
With a really long periodicity.
And then the double layers start charging up again.
It's
and
like
it's
a
really
capacitor function.
exactly so everything's cyclical. It's like there's very little that's one off.
Right.
Has there been pulsars that are anomalously blinking? Because I thought I remember there's some anomalous pulsars. And how do pulsars fit into the electric universe? If anybody knows.
Well, a pulsar is just a high frequency cyclical discharge, and then other ones might happen over billions of years or millions of years or whatever.
Build up
Or
and then
hundreds of
discharge.
years.
Yeah, that could make sense.
Yeah.
It could explain
So
things like the changing color of certain stars and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just that pulsars give us a visible example. Hey, by the way, oscillating things do happen in the plasma, And then, okay, now that we know that, we could look for longer range ones. And that's what we're looking at right here on the screen. See?
Yeah,
I mean,
could be.
Right.
you got the ones every 100,000 years, then you've got smaller spikes every 10,000 years, and then we're currently at the top of a 1,000-year spike. The last time there was at the year 0, the year 1,000, and the year 2,000 were the tops of peaks. So we're heading down now,
And
despite all the propaganda.
It should be noted, of course, that lull us into everything's going to be fine. But there is that sense that there is the pulsar led to fast spinning pulsars, which led to neutron stars as a theory, which led to black holes, which is why that whole pathway is, erroneous if the pulsar is simply a what's called a relaxation oscillator, as Don Scott calls it.
Yeah. A little knowledge is dangerous.
Exactly. Well,
If you only know about gravity, you're in big trouble.
However, we're at a point where I would be remiss if I didn't mention that there seems to be more to it than just the cycles, because the cycles might be predominant now, and I'm of the opinion that they probably are. I mean, I think that with what Jim has said and looking at what Mario said, I might have to start questioning a few more things with regards to Saturn theory. But the most important thing I'd have to question is, just looking at this, is that we can't deny that that these planets had an effect on us as humans, that we worshipped or otherwise, paid great attention to them. And they're not denying anything here in the same way. I mean, we paid attention to the skies, and we built monuments to align with that. But so there could have been more than just the planet going off kilter and picking a new North Pole. During that event, there could have been planets being moved. We could have moved in orbit and so forth. There could have been that some of these were closer together, and we can't deny things like the clash of the Titans, in the sense that
these two giant planets started beating the crap out of each other. And that was a big thing to us. I don't know when it happened now. I'm having some big questions here.
Right.
But, we shouldn't just dismiss our own writings of humans, but we should also be very rigorous in our interpretation of them, or understand when we might be making supposition as opposed to, concrete facts. Which, for example, the squatter man, we can say that the squatter man is a high energy discharge that would likely have flown into the North or South Pole, and given certain circumstances, probably the South. But that's just one part of a myth. That's just Atlas holding the sky up. There's way more than that to go on. So what were they seeing? These were the stories of the common man sometimes, not just because they were retold verbally. When you built monuments and stuff, that was more official, if you know what I mean. It was a community effort. I don't exactly know what that implies, but it implies that we should be careful, or at least wise, to how our ancestors looked at these things.
Yeah, I mean, the big taboo in science these days, and it's kind of a natural thing that we do, whether it's a playful thing or not, but the personification of things. I remember in school, this was it was announced like super dogmatically, and I bought into it 100%, of course, but it's like, never personify anything. It's got to be, just facts, man. And it's just what can be measured only, and never any type of what it still is a taboo, any type of what's the sense of a persona or a spirit of this thing? How do you feel about it? This was,
they consider that wishy-washy.
Still
or
is.
Something.
It's true wishy-washy, right? But there's part of us that naturally does that, and then ultimately there's a lot of energy in it.
Oh my God, my friggin' grandfather had names for every tree and could tell you the history of that tree.
Right,
where it was born. See what I mean? Like its tree was born.
Yeah, no, exactly. But you develop a relationship with it, and then it's a very interesting kind of. There's been a really abrupt sterilization of that part of us that's kind of natural, to do that identification, even with quote unquote inanimate objects. It's like that identification with them is fun to begin with. It's funny, but it's like, but there's something in us that does that,
Oh,
well, I think what you're talking about is like the myth of objectivity,
Mm-hmm. I like the Alan Watts line. It's like, I object to your objectivity. I find your objectivity.
I mean, but like in the case of news, it's like there's an objective viewpoint,
right?
And that's what we'll report.
Yeah, and it becomes like, and
it's actually much more healthy to have a communist newspaper, a socialist newspaper, a fascist news, to have
to look at all
different viewpoints.
Absolutely,
and saying this is our viewpoint rather than pretending that it's objectively true.
Right, but as an individual, it's really healthy to entertain both sides of it. Just as an exercise, and it's like this is a very healthy process, I find personally.
Well, it's like when you see things better with stereoscopic vision, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you need to take in different perspectives, and then out of that mix of perspectives, is there something that makes sense to you as a model of reality?
Right.
And
then it becomes wild. And then reality, the possibilities of what reality is, become much wider.
It takes active participation on the part of the news consumer to build their own model. If you just pick a source and believe their narrative, then you're not thinking.
Right.
You're a sheep.
There you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
although I wonder if that's fair to sheep. Are sheep really that? Are sheep really that bad?
Are
I
they
don't
really
know.
as gullible? Yeah.
but there is indeed a thing for the. I guess we're going to call it empirical and objective. Obviously but it has that practical application we were discussing before, and it can lead you to think that people were stupid because they didn't think that way, but that's just not how people identified with things. They personify them. They're having, like, when they were looking at the stars, they were trying to have a relationship with the gods or a relationship with the cosmos. It is a very large IMAX theater when you get right down to it, too, in the middle of the night with no, street lights.
Yeah. Amazing.
And everyone identifies.
I know. It's like, I always thought, wouldn't it be great to be in a spaceship and you've got a window in front of you and there you are looking at the universe. I said, but you got the windshield in front of you. But then I realized on the Earth, here you are, no windshield. You can see the universe.
Yeah, you can, yeah.
You're naked in front of the universe, just a little atmosphere between,
Just lying there looking up at, the stars through the northern lights. How could you not? If you just think about that as just a little bit more powerful, or then a little bit more powerful, or then suddenly, 100 times more powerful. What the heck is going on? You'd be a believer. I'd be a believer.
Yeah.
I grew up. Whatever you said is true, man.
And you really feel it's like, for me, it was in Baja California, with no lights, no city lights, no nothing. And the intensity of the sky. It's like you could feel yourself in the galaxy, and like the stars get thicker, they're thinner right above you and then thicker as they get toward the Milky Way. And you can almost visualize that you're a star cruiser coming into the galaxy, going toward the center and watching the stars go by.
Me and Robert did that when we were up in Utah. We were at that guy's house, and we just, I'm not sure his name, Wesley, and we kicked back and just looking up, and I just could not believe what I was looking at. I mean, there's the Milky Way right across the whole sky, and I'm just, going from a mountaintop across, to the other horizon, and I'm like, it was just beautiful, because usually where I'm from, you have a lot of trees, so you could, if you look up in the sky, you're seeing a smaller section, but that place was stripped clean. There was no trees anywhere. It was just you, this guy, that's it,
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, there was only like one street light in that town, and it was a half mile away. We could see pretty well.
It was quite beautiful, yes. I must go again. This time we'll drag Andy. Me and Andy we're off by a year, apparently. So.
Well, Andy wanted to go, from what I remember, but what was it? Your granddaughter was born that week, so you were, yeah.
So the next EU is in Colorado. So are there going to be some interesting tours and stuff after that?
We're trying to get one planned. I'm working with Bruce to develop a route and just get some logistics ready so we can get one going here.
Oh, I'm glad you're doing it.
Colorado Plateau and or either Red Rocks, or we're going to try to jaunt into Utah if we can. If not, we'll have to plan another conference in Salt Lake City.
Oh, well, no. We can do the whole friggin' thing all at once.
Yeah.
I think that there is, if we do the advertisement for it, remember this is coming up probably in May, so we should probably start thinking about this now, but, there's B, you, Andy, everyone in this group would be like the people. We'll do shows out in the middle of the desert. That's what we're going to do. I'll bring my friggin' computer. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
Or at least, if nothing else, everyone send me every single video you made while you're there, and I will turn it into a friggin' something. My extravaganza. Well, look at what I did with my first one when it was just great. 1 hour of.
Think about what better the next one's going to be. Yours is great, but it's like
no, it's crap. No, I understand.
No, but this is the beauty of doing this, the repetitive nature of doing this. It's like all of a sudden you turn around and you have a skill set, So.
And it's beautiful stuff too. Just what we're talking about is making my mind twitch. Can you imagine actually being out in the? Well, I can. We were. But to do it with there's people who are watching the show. There are people who are into the Thunderbolts who didn't even know that we were going to do a geology tour, and we've only done 3 of them. we shouldn't be freaking out that, I mean, they actually 4 if we include Michael Steinbacher's first one. Prior to...
You have to include that one.
Well, he did it with just like Ben or just like a couple people, but, and then suddenly there was a memorial tour for him, and then the one after that we went 2016, 2017, then now we're going to have an opportunity to try to make something even bigger. And with these wonderful, people who are truly inspired by this stuff, like, whoa, right there. Okay.
So
that's beautiful.
So, hey, Robert, you
Yes.
were saying that you've been in touch with Bruce about kind of planning an itinerary.
Yeah, we've discussed it a couple times. When I went to Denver to visit him the last time, and then when he came out here in May to visit us, we mentioned it. We're kind of like, and I think he's kind of speaking to Susan a little bit about what we can do or what we can, but I don't know of anything about logistics or anything or details in that nature. But I'm going to see him this weekend because, like I said, I'm heading to the Denver show, so we'll probably discuss it more, and maybe we can throw some more ideas out there on Sunday's show or something.
Okay. Well, I'll throw out.
I'll be traveling back. So Sunday's my birthday, so I'm trying to get home. I want to be here. So.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
Well, that'll be interesting. It would be mostly Colorado, though. You said maybe.
From what I understand, since it's in Denver, and I don't know if everybody wants to travel 4 hours just to start going to see a few sites. I mean, we could see Dinosaur Ridge there, Red Rocks, and I know Bruce knows of a couple other places in that area, which would be pretty good to see.
Well, like we were saying, we should probably divide it into just a round the Colorado trip for maybe 3 days, and then make a bigger loop out of there, and then make go into New Mexico and back up through Utah and then back in. We could do it that way.
Yeah, that would have to be paid for though.
I'm expecting that. Like we would not be doing it. No, the what we were doing. Just going. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the one that we did with the memorial tour where we had with Julian West and Andreas, and we had vans, and we brought lots of water, and communication tools so that we can communicate between the radio each other with just little walkie-talkies. I know it sounds a little bit much, but at the same time, people were very willing to pay for that because it was, it was an event. You went.
It might be better with a van. This is a possible suggestion.
Well, of course, we'll see how it goes.
I think it would work. I think for a lot of people would want to do it, 2 or 3 days, and you could have the vans and everything for that part, the larger group, and then have an extended tour for those who want to stay out for
exactly.
And then maybe at that point, everybody's in their personal vehicles and with camping gear and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and you're welcome to. It's a free country. You're welcome to follow us for the. Some people we did that before. They took their own vehicles. We only
camping. Yuck.
Well, we didn't. No, the first one was we actually went to different hotels and stuff for about I think it was 5 days or so. That was all planned out. But I like the idea of a little bit rougher, but yet at the same time with a general itinerary, with a general idea of where you're going to stay in the area, and but it's more playing it by ear. Like make sure you have a couple like $1,000 or $2,000 just to if you're going to do that thing with us, because you're all on your own. We'll help you out, but at the same time, though, if we're doing the official one, everything's part of your package, so to speak, and we'll just do that, the 3-day one or something. Yeah,
that makes sense.
Because there's also responsibility, which is, I'm sure, what Susan would be wanting to talk about. You don't want to. If you make it officially part of the Thunderbolts, then they're officially responsible, and I don't want to officially do anything that causes someone to officially get snake bite and officially die in the desert. So, best to play it a little bit, here's a nice tour. But you're seeing what I'm saying. But if we're going to just national landmarks and we're not camping and we're going to hotels, then everything is already covered by the fact that you have insurance driving the van, and everything, and that's all you really need to do. Because it's not my responsibility. If you go off into the desert, and do things on your own with just a bunch of friends, we can do that. We're taking our own personal responsibility. But if we're going to make a little tour out of it and just say, and we're going to do an extended type of tour afterwards. And who's ever in for it, be in for it, type of thing. And and we sort of basically tack that on at the end, making that we can turn into a bigger thing without actually, getting in trouble, I guess.
Look at all those starships invading.
There you go. Yeah.
I've played this game.
It's the ghost coming out of the graves.
Or it's a bunch of missiles being fired. Oh.
Yeah. No, it's just blur.
Oh, Leonard Cohen comes to mind. I'm inspired by the beauty of our weapons.